Mr. President, later today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address a joint session of Congress. I believe this invitation to speak was ill-timed and one which the Prime Minister should have had the good sense to decline. But if there's one thing we know about Prime Minister Netanyahu, is that he never misses an opportunity to further his political agenda. Let me be clear. There are nations and proxy groups that seek to destroy Israel, and that is not something we can or ever should take for granted. We've seen this with horrific slaughter by Hamas on October 7th, the subsequent Iranian missile barrage, the ongoing attacks by Hezbollah, and the continuing holding of innocent Israeli hostages, including Hirsch Goldberg Poland, with ties to my state of Illinois. That is why I have long supported helping Israel in its self-defense. But let me also make clear that support for Israel's right to exist is not a blank check for extremist policies of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Even before the October attack, Netanyahu was pursuing a deeply troubling agenda, compelled by his self-interest desire to hold together his far-right coalition and avoid legal problems. He enabled illegal settlement expansion, entertained outrageous proposals to annex the West Bank, advanced policies that would have undermined Israel's judicial independence, and ignored any long-term vision for peace with the Palestinians. Pressure from Israel's friends, including President Biden, to rethink those policies was often brushed aside or manipulated to create domestic political support in Israel. Tragically, it's been clear for years that neither the current Israeli nor the current Palestinian leadership has a vision or political will to find a lasting peace for two people, with tragic consequences. Shortly after the October 7th attack by Hamas, many of us warned our Israeli friends to learn from our own mistakes we made in the fog of rage and pain following September 11th, 2001. But I fear these lessons have been lost upon Netanyahu, and the cost for Israel and Palestinians alike have been heartbreaking. Netanyahu has failed to create a post-conflict plan, has ignored increased settler violence in the West Bank, and extremists blocking humanitarian aid from entering Gaza. When I think about the right of Israel to exist, it is pretty clear to me, start to finish, that is the basic foundational position to take. The right to defend themselves, of course. October 7th was proof positive that that's necessary. But you take a look at the course of the war in Gaza ever since. 39,000 innocent Palestinians have died. 90,000 have been injured. The scenes that come back to us from what is happening in Gaza are heartbreaking. To think what these children are dying of famine and starvation because they stopped the shipments of humanitarian aid into Gaza in a regular, orderly way. That is unacceptable. In the end, I fear the devastating civilian toll in Gaza will not only be judged a moral and humanitarian calamity, but a likely strategic failure by the Israelis as well. I have long supported a two-state solution for Israel and the Palestinians. In fact, out of the terrible Yom Kippur War came an unimaginable yet lasting peace between Egypt and Israel. So with the right leaders on both sides, it can be done. The United States has a responsibility for a renewed push on all sides toward this goal, one in which Israel and Palestinian children can once and for all live together in peace and dignity. A pending ceasefire that would see hostages released, humanitarian aid increased, and eventually lead to desperately needed outcomes seems finally within reach. Last night, at the invitation of Ben Cardin, our colleague from Maryland, I met with some of the hostage families here in the Capitol. I cannot imagine what it must be like, many of them wondering if the person that they love, their sons, their daughters, their wives, their friends, are even alive today. Unimaginable. We've got to bring this to an end, and a ceasefire agreement with Hamas is the only way to get that done. Instead of stirring the same old pot, I urge Prime Minister Netanyahu to share such a vision for the future when he speaks to the United States Congress today. I yield the floor.